Well, welcome to Impact Thursday Night. My name is James Trevette of Whitestone Christian Ministries, and tonight we are going to continue with part 3 in the Signs of His Coming series called Will the Rapture Happen on June 8th, 2014? And notice there is a question mark on the end of this. It's not a period, because I'm not here to set dates. I'm here to show you where we are and to lay out a scenario, how real this is and how imminent it is that Christ is going to return. I'm just going to lay out the facts and let you decide. But I think as we go forward, what you'll see is it's time to be about our Father's business. I'd like to start, though, with a word that we finished up with last time, called soon and very soon. I got on the 6th. It says, know that these are indeed the last days. These are the times of many great and terrible things. But you are mine, and I have chosen you to play a glorious part in these days. These days will bring fulfillment and meaning to your life and calling. Do you get that? If you wonder why, I think you are about to find out. These days will bring perspective of my kingdom, that you may see destiny in eternity in the events of your life and of the world around you. Do not shrink back from the challenges before you, but reach forward to the opportunities on the other side of the doors that I open. He's going to be opening doors, and it's not a time to shrink back. It says, be not distracted by the events that you cannot control, for I can control them. But keep focused on what I have called you to do. For the path forward is your way out of trouble and your way to victory. Do you get that? By moving forward in His calling, that is your way out of your situation. Don't retreat from the spiritual battle, but immerse yourself in my words and prayer and keep moving forward. For soon and very soon you shall see that which my holy ones have desired to see since the beginning and have labored for with their lives. Join them in writing the greatest story ever told. Rise up and answer the call, and you'll not be disappointed. The scripture he gave me was in Hebrews, the chapter on faith. He said, all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, and they admitted that they were aliens and strangers on the earth. They didn't see them, but you will. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for He has prepared a city for them. The answer is coming. But between now and His return is going to be an exciting time, a time you don't want to miss, a time that He is preparing you for. And if you are here and if you are seeking Him, you have a calling, because the world is full of people that are not in here right now. They're out doing other things. No one paid you to come tonight. God is drawing you, and He's got a purpose. So to the message in part 3, why June 8th? This is just review. Because the key signs of the times is the treaty with Israel in Daniel 9. And if you believe in a 7-year pre-tribulation rapture, then the treaty equals the rapture. The treaty 7 years, if you believe in 7 years beforehand, then if this treaty gets signed, and this is that treaty, then pack your bags. You're out of here. The peace treaty with Israel is expected in the next 3 months. If the Mideast peace treaty lines up with the Bible, then it could be the final treaty in Daniel 9. And that's our premise. We talked about the fact that there's your 7-year peace treaty. And if you believe the rapture is 7 years before, then when this happens, you're out of here. Now, it may be that you think, well, I don't have to leave exactly 7 years, because the tribulation really isn't till the last half after the abomination of desolation, according to Jesus. So these first 3.5 years are going to be opportunities for us. Or you could actually say, well, you know, the people of old suffered, and they went through a lot of things. Maybe we'll actually be around for some of this. And if we are, then it'll be what stories will be told about for eternity. You understand, up there, someone is out there keeping score. They are writing this down. I mean, the book of Rebecca is being written right now. That's right. There's someone up there writing the book of Rebecca. What's going to be in it? Because you realize once Jesus gets married and he shows up, there'll never be another time like this according to Jesus. He's only going to get married once. So this is it. If this is that time. So what do you want the book of Rebecca to say? Rebecca?
I just want to please the Lord, bring glory to His name.
That's right. So if you do it here, but what if you have to hang around for a little while? Is that okay?
Yeah.
What if you actually have to suffer a few things here? Is that okay?
He'll give you the grace to go through it.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Do you believe that?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So why June 8? Well, we covered this first part, but the peace treaty in the next 3 months fits well with other things. And we covered this last week, and I'm just going to do a summary on this. First of all, I said it covered the current political environment. Here's our timeline. And it turns out that if the treaty is signed by April 30th, it sort of lines up with a lot of things. It lines up, as we talked about last week, the EU budget cycle just happens to be 7 years, and they cut treaties for 7 years because of that, because they put financial incentives into these treaties. If you're good, then they give you money. If you're not, then they don't give you money. It's the way we've been doing it for years. So it just so happens the EU budget cycle is between 2014 and 2021. What a coincidence. Also, the midterm elections are coming up here, so if we can cut a deal before then, that looks pretty good. And not only that, if we can have 3.5 years before the midpoint where we do some evaluation, that'll carry us through the next presidential election. You know, we don't like things to end right before the elections. We like to push them past then, you know, so that it's not a distraction. So if you look at all the political, plus the fact that Hamas has come out and specifically said, like we talked about last time, that Israel will no longer be a state, that it will be destroyed in 8 years. They've come right out and opened their big mouth and said that. Now, where do you think they got the 8 years? I think they got it because there's some under-the-table deals here going on that say that, hey, if you'll sign the treaty here, we'll do this and we'll do that, but they say it'll take 8 years to eliminate Israel completely. And they just said it. So that fits. Possible? Let's look on. We looked at the prophecy of Rabbi Yitzhak Kaduri, who said that the Messiah is not going to come until the death of Ariel Sharon. Well, he died in the first week in January. So now Israel's looking for that, because this 108-year-old rabbi said he's basically going to come after that. So now they're looking for the Messiah. But is it possible that the Messiah they find may be the one who brings peace here, but may not be the right Messiah? Because remember, they're looking for a human. They're looking for someone like Moses or Abraham or David, a person who God is going to anoint, a person. They're not looking for somebody to come out of the sky. So could they be deceived up until this point? Very possibly. Lines up with that. Ariel Sharon died in January. Well, what about the blood moons prophecies? Well, we looked and there were 4 times when the blood moons followed this pattern. 3 times, actually, so far. And they were in 1492, when, of course, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But also when the Jews were expelled from Spain by the Catholics. That's when it happened. There's where the blood moons were. Israel became a nation in 48, and the blood moons were a few months after that. The 6-day war literally started right on the blood moons. And that's the only 3 times that it's happened like that. And I don't think it's going to happen again for a couple hundred years or something like that. So if that is going to be a sign, when is the event that's going to have to happen? Look for yourself. It's going to have to happen soon, because that blood moon is Passover, I believe, or sometime around then. So can you see that lines up? If we miss this time, those blood moons aren't a valid prophecy. That means they don't line up with any events. See, this is the difference. Okay, let's look at some other prophecies. We looked at the Jubilee prophecies that Rabbi Judah ben Samuel said in 1217 that the Turks, or the Ottomans, would take over Jerusalem for 8 Jubilees. And then for 1 Jubilee, it would be a no man's land. No one would officially own it or take care of it. And then for the last Jubilee, that the Israel would control it. He said this back in 1217, and sure enough, 1517, the Ottomans took over. 1917, they gave it up. And sure enough, for 50 years until 1967, when Israel took it over. And gee, what a coincidence, it ends right in 2017, which is about the time of the abomination of desolation. Could it be? If it's not now, then this prophecy is not right either. Prophecy of the popes said, hey, is this pope the last pope? There's a lot of things that lined up. We looked in detail about that he could very well be that last pope. He did take the name of Francis of Assisi, and we know that Francis of Assisi delivered a prophecy on the last pope and the end-time pope. He did that in 1226. Surprisingly enough, telling exactly what would happen. Well, if it is the last pope, he's 77 now, and that would put going through the tribulation between 81 and the age of 84. So if he's the last pope, it's going to happen pretty soon. But it would fit with this one. We saw the prophecy of Benjamin Netanyahu, who said that he would be prime minister twice, and the last time would be the time of Israel's greatest trouble. Well, he's prime minister right now, and we know the next scheduled election for the Knesset is in November of 2017. There's that date again. So he's supposed to be prime minister during this period. If this isn't it, then that prophecy is not true either. But isn't it amazing that they all line up? Just the facts. So we're going to look today at some details, because if 2017 is when the abomination of desolation happens, that's when the tribulation starts. And up until then, we could see a fairly normal life, as best we can tell, because we're very likely already in the birth pains. Wars, rumors of wars, all those things are going on. We see the threats all over the place. So 2017 could be the time when all of this comes down. And that's the start of the tribulation. So by then, certain things are going to have to take place. There's going to have to be a one world government, a one world financial system, a one world church, the third Jewish temple, and even the new Babylon. Why? Well, the one world government, the Antichrist needs a one world government to take control of the multiple nations, like is prophesied. A one world financial system, because the Antichrist will need a one world financial system to implement the mark. A one world church, because the Antichrist needs a one world church for the false prophet. Third Jewish temple, because the Antichrist needs a temple in Jerusalem to claim he's the Christ. And the new Babylon, because the Antichrist will need a city of grandeur for his capital city, which, by the way, if you've read the book, it doesn't fare really well in the end. If you remember what happens to Babylon. So, looking at these things, is it possible that all 5 of those things could take place by 2017? Well, let's look. One world government. Daniel 7:23, he gave me this explanation. The fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear upon the earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth. And this is a picture because, interestingly, this beast has 10 horns. It's different from all the other kingdoms. So why is it different? And why does it have 10 horns? Well, it has 10 horns because it's not a simple nation like everything else. It's a group of nations forming together. As a matter of fact, if we look at the 10 horns, it shows that those 10 horns are also on the 7 heads in Revelation. They're in the beasts of Daniel. And in the vision of Daniel, they're the 10 toes of this last empire. So there's something about these 10 that makes it something special. If it does take over the whole earth, then it says here, the 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. Now, wait a minute. It says here that these 10 kings are only going to rule for a short time, but they're not normal kings. Now, how can that be? It says they have one purpose, to give their power and authority to the beast. Well, I believe what it means is that the world's going to be divided into 10 parts. And these are going to be the people over those 10 parts. And they're not necessarily kings as such, and they may not be a president somewhere, but they may represent something. So the EU has divided the world into these 10 parts as 10 world regions. It turns out there's custom unions, and they're starting to come together. And a customs union is a place basically where it's a free trade area. You know, that's what the EU is. It started out, you remember, as what is it called before it was the EU? You remember? It's called the common market because it was a free trade zone. And then all of a sudden they decided to put a little bit of government over it, etc. Well, you know, here, there's one over here called what? North American Free Trade Agreement. Sound familiar? NAFTA? So could these be free trade areas that form and form 10 areas? Because there's already negotiations going on here between Canada and Mexico and the U.S. I think they're meeting very soon here. Notice what it says their plan is. Purposes of establishing a custom union include economic efficiency, and then it goes on for closer political and cultural ties, while, by the way, while also tearing down the national boundaries between the member countries. The third stage is economic integration. You see how it's moving toward this globalism. And of course the WTO, the World Trade Organization, also has the world divided into 10 regions. So can you see these 10 horns may not necessarily be what we consider a normal empire. It says this beast is different than all the others. It can obviously, rather than be some big empire where someone conquers the world, you know, Hitler attempted to unite Europe, right? Well, guess what? Europe is united. And they did it without firing a shot. So there's no reason that we can't believe that the world is going to be this way. The globalization is taking place. So you're saying, well, wait a minute. What about a world government? If this is a world government, then it's got to have rules and regulations and laws. Well, yeah, and it can. We've already got a world court. We've already got, what, UN resolutions and all of this? But is it really hard to take a step forward and say maybe it's a conglomeration of different nations put together that they may put a government over the top of? But to do it, of course, what are they going to need? Money. So this is the green tax policy from January 9th, 2007. Listen to this agenda. Taxation not only raises money to fund the government services, it also reflects the overall value system of a society. You'd have to think a while to understand what they're talking about. That means carbon tax, because we don't want to pollute the society. Do you get the idea now? That's why it's called the green tax policy. And it says the goal of the green tax policy is to create a system of public finance. Public finance? What do you mean by that? That means that you got a world government who's going to oversee things. That's what it means. And it says that they believe in the fair distribution of wealth, environmental protection, basic needs, care for the poor, provision and adequate government services to pay us, the government, and peaceful resolution of territorial conflicts. See, that's the world government. You see how it's a 10-headed beast now, or 10-horned beast. It says the green tax reform makes a clear distinction between private property and common property. Private property is that which is created by labor. This is a piece of private property. I can own it. But notice what it says. Common property is that which is provided by nature. The goal here is that the problem is that there's a lot of people out there that are wasting natural resources. They think that they have the right to own land, but they don't, because land is a common thing that should be used to take care of the world, and you shouldn't be able to own it. There should be some body that determines whether you should grow soybeans or corn, because you got to be able to feed a world. So things of nature are common property that need to be managed by a central resource. So can you see this happening? And you see the agenda. The Gallup poll in the U.S., taken in January 5th through 8th of 2014, says the most important thing to people is the dissatisfaction with government, the corruption, abuse of power. People know that something's going on. Then economy in general, unemployment, poor health care, hospitals, the federal budget deficit, ethics, morals, religion, dishonesty, lack of money. Wait a minute, gap between rich and poor, 4%. Where did we see that before? Do you see that? That's a global agenda. So you notice in a speech of the State of the Union, all of a sudden the nation's growing gap between rich and poor becomes an issue. 4% of the people care about it, according to what they said. The poll of Gallup, which was done in January, about just literally a couple of weeks before this, or 3 weeks before this. But yet it's become an issue. Wealth disparity has drawn enormous attention. What I'm showing you is that there is a global agenda. That's all. And that it's not necessarily based upon what the individuals at the individual level are calling out for in general. We go further. The UN warns of humanity divided. UN urges job creation. What's this about? Supported by redistributive policy and changes in social norms because of the inequality of today's levels are unjust. That's right. The UN is involved in wealth redistribution because of the disparity of incomes. That's a global agenda. Now I want you to think about this. It's like taxing. If you tax the richest, the top 10% or the top 5% of the people, and you say they've got all the money and we need to tax them to support us, you get that, right? I mean, that's something that we've discussed. But when you take that to a global level, what does that say? Who do you think the top 5% of wealthy people in the world are? Do you get it? You see, we are. You may think you're poor, but you're not poor compared to the rest of the world. So if you say, well, the top 5%, I have all that money, we can tax them, understand globally, that's you. So you can see how this is coming about through the distribution of wealth. Excuse me, it's a little spider being attacked here. So does it make sense to you now when you look at it from a global view? Let's go a little further. John Kerry has come out February 17th on climate change. It's as big a threat as terrorism, poverty, and weapons of mass destruction. Where did that agenda come from? Was it on the top list by the Gallup poll of what Americans are concerned about? So there is an agenda, is all I'm saying, that is a global agenda. We should not allow a tiny minority of shoddy scientists and science and extreme ideologues to compete with scientific fact. It is scientific fact, he says. So where did that agenda come from? Well, it turns out that there is a UN headquarters on September 23rd, 2014, is the Climate Summit. The Secretary General has appointed Michael Bloomberg as a special envoy to climate change. It's a global agenda. And you know the carbon tax. You know who would pay the carbon tax? The industrialized societies. So all I'm saying, am I saying that this is a wrong thing? No, I mean, if you look at it, it makes sense. It makes sense to say we should find a way to take care of the entire world. That's what globalization is all about. But what I'm showing you is that what's happening is we're building this world empire. And we're setting up the situation, right or wrong, for the Antichrist to take control. We okay? You see it? A one world financial system. It says, Revelation 13, it says, he also forces everyone, small, great, rich, and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark. That may have sounded crazy before. Does it sound crazy to you now? I found that the name Bloomberg seems to keep appearing throughout everything I've been doing lately. You know, I told you that he was the one the UN has elected for the climate change guy. Of course, you know who he is, the mayor of New York. Well, his newspaper and his articles are showing up everywhere. This is a Bloomberg. Global leaders took their biggest step yet toward a new world order that's less U.S.-centric with a more heavily regulated financial industry. See, the crash of the stock market scared everybody because America was controlling the wealth of the world. So they said, we can't allow that. We've got to set up a good financial organization that will allow this to be controlled and not allow the U.S. to bring about these kinds of crashes in the economy. By the way, the Pope agreed with this. He put out an encyclical on this. This is Pope Benedict in 2009. He called for a new world financial order. The urgent need for a true world political authority that can manage global economy, guarantee the environment is protected, and ensure world peace and bring about food and security for the poor. See, it's all coming together. Bloomberg again. Bloomberg article. China's state press calls for building a de-Americanized world. They believe in the creation of a new international reserve currency to replace the present reliance on the U.S. dollar. And China has a little bit of power about this now. You know, they're the ones buying up all the gold and has all our debt. And so they believe that since they've got this big debt, they want to make sure that the dollar is not an unstable commodity. So now we're looking for the financial controls that we need for the world. So you can see how this might take place. This is from January 29th. World currencies are falling fast, but the IMF says don't panic. Don't you love it? We're all going to die, but don't panic. So they're saying that the shining stars of the world economy can no longer be taken for granted, that the currencies like Brazil and India that were stable now are becoming unstable. So what are we going to do about it? It casts doubt on the readiness of politicians to act. Well, who's going to act? Because if the individual states aren't able to stabilize their economies, what are we going to do? Is it getting clearer? What about the technology to be able to do this? Well, we know that the RFID chip, this is now basically in almost all the passports. They've even got a little logo for implantable now for a device. This VeriChip has an implantable icon, so that's interesting. So yes, the RFID chips exist. But another major step has just taken place. All American credit cards will disappear in 2015 and be replaced with new tech. You remember the crash that we had because of Target over Christmas? Well, when these things happen, there's a reaction. Just like the stock market caused a crash. Well, gee, for whatever reason now, the government and basic banks are deciding that we have to have these chips in our cards. It says by October 2015, all cards are going to have the chip. And you say, well, that's not the same thing as putting it in my hand. Well, let's take a look at what this is about. That's true, they're not. It says this is going to render extinct the plastic in your wallets. No more black magnetic strip, no more signing on the dotted line because it uses chip and pin technology. That is a major change to the market. But what is being changed here? They're eliminating the magnetic strip readers, but what are they putting in? Chip readers. And they've got all of the validation and security in these chip readers. Now, once they have put these all over the world for validation that can validate a chip, and they've got the logic of it, do you see that as actually the major part that's necessary to be able to do this? That once that transition is made, then it's not that big a change to take the chip from here to here, because all the logic and everything else is already in place for it. So you see, that could happen by 2017. This is going to happen by 2015. That's pretty quick to make that big a change. One world church. Let's look at it real quick. Are we going to have one world church? All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast. Well, in a way, that sounds like a one world church. Thessalonians. Now we request you, brethren, with regard to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together with Him. Notice that says, coming of the Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together with Him. Do you see a problem here relative to how things might look relative to, say, the rapture? Is that our gathering together with Him? If it is, then it's lumped together with the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. Well, you say, well, maybe that is the rapture when He doesn't, His feet don't touch the, the earth. But if you read on, down to verse 3, let no one deceive you in any way, for it will not come. What will not come? The return of the Lord Jesus Christ will not come until the apostasy comes first and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the Antichrist. So those two things must happen before Christ returns and our gathering together with Him. Well, the term apostasy there is exactly that, apostasia. Apostasia doesn't mean that you fall away from the church. Do you know what the definition of apostasia is? It means you fall away from the truth. Get it?
Does that mean that they leave the cross and the Trinity out?
We're going to cover that. It's a falling away from the truth. It doesn't mean that the church is going to go away at all. As a matter of fact, at this point, the Antichrist would love to have a church. Right? Because who's going to endorse him as the Messiah or the Maitreya or all the different saviors that are supposed to show up. The Mahdi. But remember the church in Laodicea, because you are lukewarm, neither hot or cold, I'm about to spit you out of my mouth. So that isn't a good sign for being saved. I mean, if they're spit out of his mouth, that's a pretty good indication that they're probably not going to show up in heaven. You see the bumper stickers out there lately that says there are no lukewarm Christians in heaven? I saw that. That's an interesting one. He says, you say I am rich, but you're poor. So something's going to happen. Is there a road to one world church? Well, we know there's one version because, you know, Rick Warren, as you know, this is the Islamic Society of North America. He's speaking it there. And he is a signatory into the Chrislam, which, First Church of Chrislam. Today's message, move over Jesus, Muhammad is coming. So, yes, there is an attempt to build a one world religion in that regard. Tony Blair, you remember where we heard that name before? He's also the spokesman for the quartet, which is the ones doing the negotiation, that's right, for the peace treaty of Israel. Remember? And it just so happens that those nations look a whole lot like the four beasts of Daniel, that has a mouth like a lion. The lion is the sign for what country? Great Britain. And the mouth of the quartet is who? Tony Blair. Well, it turns out Tony Blair has converted to Catholicism, and his purpose is to bring together the world's major religion. He says the foundation's aim is to advance interfaith action and wrestle back influence from extremists of all faiths, not just Islam. What could that mean? Who could be an extreme Christian? How about one who doesn't agree that there is only, we agree that there's only one way to heaven. So that could be a problem. The common word, have you guys seen that out there on the internet, a common word? It is trying to bring together Islam and Christianity into a common Bible. And they've been working on it for a good while. Lots of signatories, like Rick Warren and a bunch of others. Robert Schuller was one of them, of course. And Wycliffe is the one doing the work to join the Bibles together. Yes, Wycliffe Bible translators. This is quotes from Wycliffe. In many Muslim contexts, for example, the term used for Son of God communicates none of the richness and depth of a relationship and identity of Christ. So in fact, the translated term used in some Muslim cultural contexts indicates something blasphemous. So we don't want to include Son of God in there because it communicates that God had sexual relationships with Mary. And the Trinity might also communicate there's more than one God. So we've got to adjust these things because culturally they're not well understood. So we've got to adjust the Bible in these areas. The meaning of the term Son of God is of vital importance. Of course it is. It needs to be communicated clearly and with care so that it is understood in its true and intended meaning. Not, of course, that he is the Son of God, because that's blasphemous. Also from Wycliffe, I did a study on how they do their Bible translations. It's really interesting. So this is one of their, I took it out of their book as an example of how they're doing the translation. The question to ask here is who or what is the term referring to in Luke 5:24. Most scholars agree that the referent phrase, the Son of Man, is Jesus. He's calling himself the Son of Man. Those scholars debate how clear it was to Jesus' audiences. How would they know who he's talking about? In this case, Jesus used the third person, and it's not often that people refer to themselves in the third person. When's the last time you referred to yourself as the teacher or the parent? Some languages have more trouble doing this than others. If all you wanted to do is the translation to communicate the referent, then the accurate translation for the Son of Man would be I. Now, if you can take the Son of Man out, how hard is it to take out the Son of God? I. So, this is Wycliffe, guys.
Now, who is Wycliffe?
Well, Wycliffe is the guy, I think, who died for translating the Bible into English. Wycliffe is the Bible translators from a long time, but now they have sort of, personally, I'd say there's an apostasy here. If you study, it's fascinating how they do their interpretation relative to cultural context so that it won't offend anybody. But you can see what's going on here. What about Pope Francis? And why did I bring up Pope Francis? Well, I think that we look at the Catholic Church, and he is saying, I then greet and cordially thank you all, dear friends, belonging to the other religious traditions. Excuse me? That's right. He's calling Christianity a tradition. First of all, the Muslims who worship the one God, living and merciful, and call upon Him in prayer. Yes, this is Pope Francis.
God have mercy.
So, there is some possibilities here for a one world religion. They got a really nice off city already. And the Pope is pretty popular around the world. He can go into any nation and draw a large crowd. See, I think it's very possible that he could very easily, like the Roman Empire did in the first time, by bringing in all the other religions and forming the Roman Catholic Church, they could go and do it again. So they're looking for if you're looking for a head of someone to endorse you as the Antichrist, in the world, who would be the biggest person that you can think of that could do that? So it's a thought. There's also the URI, the United Religions Initiative. And this is interesting, often just called the UR. We, people of diverse religions, spiritual expressions, and indigenous traditions, that's what they're calling this, religions are traditions, established the United Religious Institute to end religiously motivated violence. So what this is we have a UN, right? Now, are Islamic countries a part of the United Nations? You guys know? Are they in there? Yes, they are. Is Islam just a religion, or is it also a government?
Both.
It's both. And yet, they have signed up to be a part of the UN, right? You say, well, you'd say that Islam is not going to join with anybody. But they did. They joined the UN. So there is a model of something where they can come together and have an effect. So what if instead of trying to form one world religion, what if we formed a united religion, like the United Nations, where we could bring all the religions together, but not necessarily try to bring them together doctrinally, but bring us together to respect the uniqueness of each tradition, value the voices and respect each other. Therefore, interdependent people rooted in our traditions, we now unite on behalf of our earth. So can you see that there is a possibility for a one world church? This is not really a church. This is their preamble, but if you look at their principles, number one is they're not a religion. But they could be a church. Just like the United Nations can be a government. Right? Because all you have to do is start tithing to these guys, and the false prophet could come out of here. He doesn't have to come from Islam or Catholicism. It's very interesting. We respect the sacred wisdom of each religion. We do, and we seek to welcome those people who do not discriminate. By the way, would you fit that? No, why?
Because you have to,
Go by what
there's
the Word of God
none
says.
other name under heaven whereby we must be saved.
Oh, you're in trouble with that.
Jesus Christ.
Well, then you don't fit this if you believe that. See the problem? Equitable participation of women, excuse me, you can see they're starting to bring in the agenda, the global agenda. Sound ecological practices, does that sound like the agenda? How about this? Shall relinquish only such autonomy and resources as are essential. You know what that means? That's control, folks. Oh, we don't expect you to relinquish your autonomy or resources except when we really, really want it. And also to develop financial and other resources. Share financial and other resources. There it is. There's the money. So do you see how this could happen? You don't have to build a world church. You could build the UR. And you'd have it.
Babylon all over again.
Actually, we're going to cover that, but we don't have time tonight about Babylon. And so we're going to have to cover the other issues, the third Jewish temple and the new Babylon, next time. I think you'll find them interesting also.